Inspiration Nation. Hello, Lee Kemp here for another week on the podcast. Here with both Joe and Noya. How you, Joe and Noya?
Oh no!
Tell you what, you need sorting out, Lee. I tell you
Right.
what's going on. You've been drinking.
No. We're running through this one. I'm here with Ryan and Noya. How are we doing? I'm just going to call you weird names for the whole thing now. Right, Boniface, you good?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
And Joseph, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
It's because I was trying to do a little thing where I'm holding up the Inspiration logo off my hoodie to the camera, and it seemed to distracted me. So I was multitasking, and
we
it
talked about this, haven't we?
screwed up the start. So once again, I cannot multitask.
Well, we talked about multitasking already. It's the bandwidth. We can tell you about that. We'll keep
Yeah,
telling
I've
you all about
obviously
that.
not.
actually.
Ironically, I have not got good bandwidth in my brain, and also, in case I cut out for anyone listening during this podcast, I also don't have very good bandwidth on my internet.
Don't put yourself down, Lee. It's the internet, mate. It's fine.
So, how are we this week, Joe? You're very good today. You're quite
Animated.
hyper. Yes,
I-
animated is a good word.
I want to get into the zone when I'm on the Nation podcast. That's what it's all
Okay.
about. Got to
And
be
how are
there.
you,
Energy. Boom.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
We are, of course, across all social media platforms. Listen to IN at Listen TOIN. Joe is JN Coaching Tech, or at JN Coaching Tech. It's all over the show today. YouTube, we are the Inspiration Nation podcast. Just search for us. And Joe, you love a bit of TikTok still. Is that still going?
Tickety talk. Yep, absolutely.
Are we at JN Coaching Tech on TikTok as well?
Jane Coaching Technologies on TikTok, actually.
Okay, give him a look on there as well. So, what's the subject of the day, Joe?
I just want to say something before we do the subject. I want to just do something to our Spanish viewers. I was talking on my Instagram, and I thought it sounded really cool. I just want to think what you think. If I say Nación de Inspiración, what do you think about that? Nación de Inspiración.
I think that's probably Spanish Inspiration Nation.
It is.
We going multilingual now, are we?
I tagged in a couple of my Spanish listeners about that, and yeah, they liked it, so it was good. I liked it. I thought it sounds really
Excellent.
cool. I think
It
it's
does,
going
it does
global.
sound cool.
Yeah.
I think it does. Yeah. Nación de Inspiración. I think you guys want to practice that. I want to hear you say it next time we come on the podcast. Nación de Inspiración. I think you could do that.
Probably not going to happen, but we are global. We thank all our listeners here in the UK, Australia, America, Canada, all over Europe, some in the Middle East, some in Africa as well. There are a lot of multinational listeners going on, so we thank you all.
Lovely. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you. Absolutely.
So now that we've got your Spanish out of the way, Joe, and I will not be repeating that, what are we talking about?
Right. Okay. So this is one from Ryan, actually. This is one Ryan put up again to me around Christmas time. And last week, obviously, we did the very early podcast, which Ryan was a great fan of. I know that. And this week, we're going to talk about leader over manager. I thought it was a really good subject, actually. And I think it's quite apt, actually, considering we are at this point with the podcast. So I thought we would look at this and see whether we think there's a difference, whether we think it's a blend of the two, whether we think they're separate, whether we think one's process-driven and one isn't. I think it's quite an interesting subject because a lot of people will be managed, a lot of people will be led even. When your business is, you can lead yourself. We've talked about it before in the podcast, but it's all around, I think, how we interact with our leadership. Or we might, and also we're talking about managers, because we get, managers are titles in themselves. Pardon me, excuse me. So it's about that really. So for me, I think managers can be leaders, and I think there's a blend of the two in my view. In my view, when there's a manager, it's really around that you are managing people, and when you are assigned a manager, you have no choice. You are managed by that person, and you usually are assigned, and you can't say, well, I'm going to, I think I don't want that manager, I want a different manager. That doesn't work in the line of business. You get a manager and you have to work under them. The difference I think between manager and leader is that I think manager, there is no choice around whether you are going to be, working for them or following their instructions. Whereas a leader, I think if you were like going to follow a leader. I think leaders are the ones that people follow, whereas managers, I think, are the ones that there's no choice really. I think you can look at all types of different leaders that you have. You can aspire to be like them, and I think leaders do that, and that's why I think managers can be leaders. It just depends on what type of manager you are and how you look at that, really. So that's really my view on take on leader over manager. I just want to get your thoughts on that. What are your thoughts? What are your initial reactions, guys?
Ryan, did you want to chip in first?
Yeah, sure. I definitely believe they're a blend of the two. I believe you can be a manager. Sorry, I believe you can be a leader without being in a position of management or leadership, if you like. However, managing someone specifically relates to looking after what they do, whereas leading someone doesn't necessarily have to be that. I also think that we talk a lot about kind of projects and tasks and jobs on the podcast, and I think that generally they can be split into two sections, looking after people and looking after the task itself. I think leaders have a more of a fairer reflection to either both sides or maybe more sided to people, whereas managers are more sided to the task. Not that doesn't mean to say that any or all managers forget the people that work for them. However, managers tend to be more focused on getting the result, whereas the leaders are there to look after the people, I feel.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. That's fair enough assumption. It's a very tough overview there. Yeah, Lee, what about you?
So a couple of initial thoughts. There was a quote we made actually off a show a few weeks ago, which I really liked, which I can't remember which one of us said it now, but the quote that we put up was that leadership is a trait, not a job, which, like that to both of you were saying, especially like you were saying there, Ryan, is I don't think leadership is exclusive to a job role. Leaders are everywhere, and you become a leader through having those traits. It reminds me, I've probably told this story in the podcast before, so tell me to shut up if I have, where when I was at school and went along to parents' evening, and my mum went to speak to my form tutor, who said that an observation of me is that I could make a really good leader one day. And the reason is that we all sat on our like pods of desks, and you had a book you had to get signed by your parents and by the teacher each week to say you've done your homework. And he said that I never once walked up with my own book. I always gave it to someone who was closer, who then walked it up for me. And I wasn't even consciously aware this was a thing. It was just happening. And obviously the people were happy enough to do me a favor and do this within the group just through our dynamic and stuff that we had, which it didn't really stick with me at the time. It's only something that's come back to me in recent time. But I think that's some of those what you call your leadership traits with no official hierarchy. And in any places, social environments or work environments or places you go with hobbies and stuff, there's always people who fall into those leadership roles, and it's not often, or it's not always, should I say, an anointed thing. It is because they're a leader. And then echoing both what you said, I think management is a different style. And I think you're spot on, Joe, when you said people don't have choices to work for a manager, but they do have choices to follow a leader. And those who excel in management roles are normally those that treat it like a leadership role. You have to have elements of management. There are things you are managing, but if you're in any sort of role where what you've got to do is inspire or motivate or oversee people doing a role, leadership traits are the best way to get that to happen.
Totally agree.
That would be my kind of initial thoughts, I think. And you see, like, there's so many things, and it flips between either talking about difference between leaders and bosses or the difference between leaders and managers. And I do think there's a slight difference. I think your mindset of a boss is that person who sits there and everyone is there to work for them. And your mindset of a leader is someone who is leading, and they are there to lead other people. Like you talk about, Joe, with the serving thing. And I think it's that kind of mentality that separates it. Whereas I think manager or management is just something that has to happen behind the scenes. But I always see it's that distinction between people who think they're a leader and people who think they're a boss, which overlaps a lot with the badge orientated mentality we were talking about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. Go on, Ryan, you're going to say something there?
No, I was just saying the same. I agree.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I've always looked, when I go into business, I always try and look for someone that inspires me. You know, you might have a manager and stuff like that, and you always look to your manager. So you want someone who's going to inspire you and is going to want to, is going to want to help you grow. And that's really where you are. So I've seen good examples of good management, bad management over many years. And the managers that have got the best out of me every single time are the ones that have worked with me, that have worked with my strengths. And so for me, it's just around, having that, I think, openness as a manager to actually, I think you should have the traits to inspire. I think every manager should have those abilities to inspire their people, because you do that and you really get to know your people, you really get to understand them, you get to really know their challenges, you get to know their fears, you get to know what they're good at, you get to know what they can develop. And you develop people, you can make them someone, or help them be the person they want to become in their work, wherever they are, wherever you are a leader or manager. Then I think you're going to get people running through walls for you. I'm quite fortunate that I've got a current manager who wants me to express my strengths through my coaching. So of course they're getting a massive value out of me, and it just reflects on what I do. And so it's just around making sure that, if any managers listening to this, I'd say, if you can have those traits of a leader, and even if you are managing people who who are assigned to you, because that's usually what happens. You're a manager, get people assigned to you, and even managers the other way, I suppose. They might get people they don't really. I didn't really want them in my team. But the thing is, the whole point of that is to use things like coaching to really, find out more about them, find out what they want to achieve, and help them achieve it. And don't be afraid to step into it. And I think, it looks from both sides. You can look at it from the person who's being managed, but the manager looking at the person they're managing. And I think there's a lot to be said. It's all about relationships. It's all about how, I suppose, coin a phrase, manage those relationships. But I think for me, it's how you inspire those relationships so you can get the best out of people, especially when you've got difficult tasks and hard tasks to actually achieve. Well, Lee, you're going to say something.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think you hit it spot on as well, kind of getting to a deeper layer with it about inspiring people and bringing out the best in people. Because the thing I always talk about, and have done for years, about the strengths of being in leadership roles, and there being a big difference between someone who can go into a team as running a team, and they've got strong people around them, and they can go in and they can oversee it, and they're in what I would call a ticking over team, where it runs because everyone's very experienced, they know what they're doing, they've worked their way for ages. Or someone who will go into a team that is struggling or has knowledge gap, who has underperformers, and can work with those people to bring out the best in them.
Yeah.
And there's always a bit which I was coaching to people, or try and coach in early on in leadership roles, is those two differences. Because to an extent, anyone can go in and run something that is running itself. The strength comes from going in and be able to work with challenging people. And like you say, Joe, about not focusing on the results, I'm much more interested in seeing someone who will try and bring out the best in people, no matter what that result is, as opposed to someone who might be flying, but it takes very little effort. Because I think that challenge has got to be there. Otherwise, I don't think then people in those roles, and for people listening who are in or aspire to that sort of thing, if you're not challenging yourself, you're never going to grow in that way.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think even though when you're saying about people, you go into a team that's really high performing, right? You go into, you manage that team, but even then, you should be trying to lift them to a higher level. Looking
Absolutely right.
So where are they now? Where do they want to be? Right? It might be that they need to go right. They're just crushing it, so they need a new, fresh challenge. So what is it? What is it they want to do? What is it they want to achieve? Because they're doing so well. Now, how do you maintain that level? Because best in the world, if people aren't progressing, they're not going to continue to perform at that level. So how do you continue to do that? And that's through having those conversations and having those deeper conversations around, okay, so what do you want to do? You're doing really well, so what do you want to do better? And it's really funny because even a week previous to last, when I'm doing my coaching, getting people to coach, people are saying, well, what if people are crushing it? I said, that's good. You wanted to say that's great. So what's next? What's the next thing? Because you want to challenge those people and say, okay, so you're doing really great. So what can you do better? What's the next step for you? And challenging that, because they've never been asked that. Because what's happening is because they're performing so well, there's no focus on them, and so they're just performing, doing their thing, doing their work. But those people still need their challenges. They still need something to aspire to, and push them maybe harder than they've ever been pushed, because they've obviously got capabilities. And so that's why I look at coaching. It doesn't matter where you are in your performance, you can always improve, no matter where you are. And I think if you're a leader, if you've got a good coaching capability, that I just think stands you out from a lot of other managers and leaders. And it's really interesting because in industry we are, I think, I'm quite sure where you work as well. They've got they coin the phrase of team leader, don't they? Which is really interesting. Not team manager.
Yeah, no, you're
think
right,
it's
and
really-
I always favour that phrase.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting thing, isn't it, to think that actually I'm a team leader, not a manager. And it's really interesting when you go higher up the levels that you say, now I'm the manager of this department, which is really strange when you think about it, because you think, well, shouldn't they be called a leader of this department? Because, you know what I mean, like to inspire that department and like leader of this organization, you know, when you get to that level, you know, that for me is something that's really strange. You get these sort of levels that are sort of managing sort of smaller teams and they're like leaders, and then you've got the higher, they're called managers. It's really interesting. I think that's a really interesting dynamic. And when we're talking about here, we're talking about different traits. I think maybe businesses and where you work could take a bit of a leaf out of that and maybe sort of look at it and say, well, actually, yeah, you are managing, but actually really there's a lot to do with leadership. How do you lead that department? How do you lead that area? How do you inspire them? How do you find out more about them? You know, and how much does that leader or manager know about that department, and how, you know, to inspire the people below them to see, well, actually, what do they need and how can they sort of pass that? Because it's all from the top, isn't it? You know, all
No,
the
you're
traits come from
absolutely
the top.
right. And we
Yeah.
do, where I am now, we make a conscious effort to refer to ourselves as the leadership team rather than the management team for that exact reason you're talking about there.
And I would totally, I would agree with that. And also, you know, I don't know, are the titles still, are they still managers or leaders? Managers or leaders in your organisation?
They're leaders at the first step, and then managers from there on.
Interesting, right? That's really interesting, isn't it? I think ours are the same. You know, go up and it's called managers. It's really interesting why there's that shift. But I quite like, and it's very similar to what you said, you know, Lee, around, you know, as you go up, they're called the leadership team. But they're like the individual titles are managers, which is really interesting. I never really thought about it until we talked about this podcast, really, to say, well, you know, those other levels, leader, now you get these sort of, you know, people who are responsible for even more people, call them managers, which is really interesting because, like we said, I think, Ryan, you coined it earlier, you know, managers looking at process maybe less than, you know, people. But I think it's a two-way thing. It's not just about that. You know, how you achieve things. You know, when managers achieve things, you know, are they looking at the cost to the people? And that's another thing that I look at really strongly. If I'm looking at a good manager or leader, I'm looking for, okay, they've achieved the task, they've achieved it, but at what cost was it? You know, what cost to the people? Has it been really positive experience for the people, or has it been quite a negative experience? How have they actually pushed that through? Have they used fear or have they used motivation? And I really love that because, you know, I've seen both, and I've seen, you know, both where, you know, when it's used inspiration, it's just unbelievable, you know, the performance and the dedication. But when I see it done the other way, where it's like, you know, done through fear and stuff, I see people comply and they don't want to deliver more than they have to. They'll just meet what they have to. Yeah. And I think, go on, you're going to say, sorry.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a big thing to be adding that. So if you're going to a management role, going to leadership role, you know, look to lead, but look to coach, look to get the team to, you know, find out more about them, find out, you know what's going on with their lives, you know, because people have got lives, and it's not being nosy, you're just saying, well, how you doing, how you feeling, you know, and it's really around those things. I know we coined in a previous episode that we talked about, you know, and I thought, you know, Lee, and I think even you, Ryan, in some sense, so, well, you know, instead of saying, how you doing, how you feeling, and that's a really big thing, and like, because a lot of people aren't, you know, they don't really want to open up a can of worms page potentially, and they don't really say, hey, how you doing? I'm fine, great, okay, move on. And I think, you know, if you're a leader, you can really step into that space and think, okay, well, I'm going to find out more about these guys. I'm going to think, what are their fears? What are they struggling with? What do they want to get out of this? And how can I make them feel as safe and as inspired as possible to make themselves feel good, to develop themselves? But that then helps the organisation naturally. And the whole thing becomes a massive, great, inspiring, performing team, because the whole organisation is a massive team. And if you can get that sort of culture-driven, inspiring leadership throughout the whole organisation, you're talking about a different type of animal that's actually going to crush everything that's in its way. in terms of achieving lots of objectives. You know, when you go for those one-to-ones, they're going to be really inspiring. When you go for those PDRs, they're going to be amazing. They're going to be like, I'm looking forward to my PDRs, not just a tick box. I'm really, you know, my manager's going to really be interested in what I've got to say, and there's going to be some great feedback, and there's going to be some things I'm going to work on, but they're going to really support me through the process and coach me and set me, you know, we're going to set together some really, really important milestones and timeframes where we're going to really look to achieve this. And if we don't, we're going to look at those and think at them and why, and be really like around how can we do this better? You know, what could you do, and what did work, and use those things to move forward. And this is all what creates an amazing organisation. If you can get that sort of thing bedded in, then you're a winner, I think. And especially in today's very competitive market, it's about people. It's about how you lead people and how you really feel them emotionally engaged with what they do, so they feel they have meaning, they feel they have impact in what they do, they feel they've got some form of control over what they do, and so they can just deliver the best results for themselves, for the leader, for the manager, and then ultimately for the organisation, who has been massively profitable and really awesome. And that's it. That's what I think about that.
I think you touched on a really important point in that as well, which I think is the key traits, again, between that leadership thing and the boss thing, is motivation and fear. And I think exactly where you say, Joe, where you look for that, where people are driving things through fear, that to me sits with that trait that falls on the, you know, the boss side of the fence. And I like the way you talk about the cost of the people, because there's only so many times you can drive people through fear into delivering a result that, you know, creates such a negative environment. You'll burn people out. People look to go elsewhere. It's not enriching. It's not rewarding for people whatsoever. Or, like you said, the other side, it's through motivation. And a really interesting word you put in there as well. It wasn't just that people feel motivated and empowered. It's that they feel safe as well. Yeah. And again, I think driving fear creates the exact opposite of that. People aren't going to be safe, or not they're not going to be safe, they're not going to feel safe, and they're going to do things out of that fear. Whereas actually, if they feel comfortable, if they know that they're supported, if they know they're going to get reassured, if they know something goes wrong, that it's going to be dealt with in a professional, grown-up way, then that gives you much more room to then have people who are, you know, in control of their destiny, going to experiment a bit of things, are going to get a lot more reward out of work. And I think the way you described that is a perfect way to look at the difference between those two things. And I think if you get that sense that there is fear driving things, that will be when you have people in that boss mentality.
Yeah, I agree, because when you get people in a fearful state, they're gonna hide things. They're not going to reveal things. They're going to be truthful about things because they're fearful of the reprimands or whatever they're going to get. That can come from everywhere as well. That's not just team. That's, you know, that can be organisational wide. About, I just don't want to hear the bad news, right? I don't want to hear the bad news.
Yeah,
you need to hear the bad news. You need to hear it. You need to deal with it. If you don't deal with it, that's when organisations suffer, and that's when, you know, I think, you know, if you are having that, then that's potentially where managers and leaders are putting their head. Well, I wouldn't say leaders. I'll say managers. I would say managers. I think if you do call yourself a leader, you are inspiring people. If you're a manager, you know, it might be that you're putting your head in sand a little bit and you're not willing to step into that. It's difficult to step in. It's difficult, right, to hear the bad news, but it's how you respond to that bad news which makes you, differentiates you. Yeah,
I think you're right.
How do you respond to that?
And I think there's a bit for people as well who, you know, people who aren't in leadership roles at the moment, but, you know, they might be in an environment where they are worried, is sometimes actually talk about what you're worried about. Because I think sometimes leaders and organisations and businesses can surprise you with how they respond to things when it's there. But there's, you know, quite often there's a kind of, it's in people's heads that if they do something wrong, there's going to be a consequence from it. You know, we come from generations and generations where that was the case, and I think it's becoming less and less and less the case now. But there's that bit both ways. I think that whatever it's in, if it's in a company, like I said, if it's in social circles, if it's, you know, part of a club or something, that reassurance has got to be there. And then on the other side of it, because it's always a two-way street, if people have got to be prepared to speak up, say what's happened, be open and honest, because quite often that itself lends people to be more understanding of what's going on. But I think it's just, you know, in all the dynamics exist, it's getting everyone being comfortable with that being the setup.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, it depends on the culture, though, doesn't it? I mean, it has to be
I think you're 100% right.
People have to see it first.
Yeah.
You know, they won't come forward unless they actually see it happening. And again, and it's brilliant. I just I started delivering this coaching last week to people who who are learning to be coaches, and there was a brilliant video that I play in the session where what's his name? His name's Jeff Grout, and he talks about when a leader came into the room. It's the Red Arrows actually, and he comes into the room and he said it was amazing. This leader of Red Arrows comes in and he's doing an appraisal of their performance in the display. Anyway, the leader comes in, sits down, it's a dishevelled sort of little room, but it's obviously recorded and stuff. He sat down, and the leader said, what I did wrong today was my angle was out. The leader admitted that he was wrong first, which then allowed others to say they made mistakes. And I thought that was excellent. I thought, to actually for a leader to say, look, this stuff that I've not done things right. This is what I've not done quite right. And he's let that sort of sit. So that allowed other people to actually feel that, okay, so I can reveal what's not going right at the moment. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And I don't think that's much of that goes about, because, when you're a leader, you don't want to be getting things wrong, but you do. I've been a manager leader and I've got things wrong. And I think that's a really powerful thing there. And one of the things that I think is, it's a personal thing as well, is where you can open up to someone if you can feel, confident yourself. Say, well, I do this well, but where am I doing things wrong? Where is, I don't think I'm doing this very well. Where is it that my problems are? And having those honest conversations, but it all comes from having a space to say, okay, I feel comfortable in revealing this to you so I can get better. And I think that comes down to amazing leadership, and as we said before, people feeling safe so they can come forward and actually say these things.
And I think that's a perfect way to make that happen. Like you said, Joe, if it all comes back to the culture, is exactly from that example there, where you've got a leader who's completely leading by example and setting the tone of the culture in being open themselves in that mistake. And again, people listening who are in those sort of positions or want to get better with that, I think that's such a core strength, being able to be open about your own mistakes and set that tone. And I think there's no better way to kind of encourage that culture, Joe, than being the one who's doing that.
Yeah, and it's that whole thing, isn't it? It is around, being honest. And if you can show that by example, you are coining a phrase, leading by example, right?
Yeah.
Just that's it. You're leading by example, and you're a human being, right? I don't care what position you are. You're a CEO. I don't care. Earning millions, whatever, you are going to make mistakes. And the fact that you can open up and say that to your people, I haven't got everything right, but doing it in a really genuine way, I think it really does open up some honesty that can really help everybody in an organisation, especially in your teams as well, because there are going to be things that you don't handle that well. Do you know what? I didn't really handle that well. There's been times when I'm in the training where I haven't handled that well, and I've been honest to say, look, I think I handled that well. What else can I do? What's going on? And it really does almost put you, for that moment, you're on a level with someone, because people do look at leaders, they're high up. Can I say this? There's always that thing of authority as well that people can get hung up. I know I did. I had that, and I've had to challenge that, and I've had to sort of step into not having that and going, look, I need to speak to you, because it doesn't matter what level you are, everyone's a human being and need that connection. I think we need to strip away sometimes in those conversations. We just strip away those titles to allow people to have a natural, genuine, honest conversation. But I think that's the leader's job, to be able to strip that away and say, hey, look, we're two people. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of this and see if I can help you. And I think there's a lot to be said in that real human connection. And stripping away sometimes a lot of the corporate stuff that gets put into this stuff, which can actually, people can actually feel fearful of. And again, that's down to the culture you drive and how you want your organisation to be. And a lot of these sort of organisations that have really hit real speedy growth are the ones that have started with really flat structures. They really feel like a team. They usually find that the smaller organisations where they have those conversations, they have maybe, they get together in the morning before they start work and they do some sort of activity. They get to know each other, do a lot of sort of getting out together and sort of getting to know each other a bit more socially. And when they come to the office, they sort of know more about each other, and they then have that performance. They have that connection with each other that brings that strength. So when something really difficult happens, everyone really digs deep. And as I said to you before, if you get that trust, if you get that thing with people will run through walls for you. They will absolutely go through fire for you if they feel that you have their best interests at heart. And I think that's what leadership is. And I think managers can totally do that and get that blend totally right. But it does take courage sometimes. You've got to be brave, I think, as a leader sometimes, because sometimes when you're given that title, you think, no, I've got to get everything right. No, you don't. You're a human being. You will get things wrong. And sometimes you just got to say to your team, I didn't get that right. And actually, sometimes you need to say to the team, well, I've got this problem. How do you think we can solve it, guys? And work together and almost like coach it through together as a group. And I think even that's more powerful, because then the team is empowered to help solve the problem. They feel more invested in solving the problem, and everything starts to work so well. So anyway, that's my 2 penny worth.
I think you're absolutely spot on with that. For people listening, if you want to inspire, there's no better way to do it than wearing an Inspiration Nation hoodie or t-shirt. Maybe drinking from an Inspiration Nation mug. Do we have mugs for our mug shot?
Yeah, mug shot.
Are you in the mug shot, Ryan?
Yeah, I've got it.
There we go. Awesome. Head over to inspirationnation.org.uk. You can collect there, say, t-shirts, various designs, mugs, mouse mats, the tote bag, of course, that I love. There's Joe's T-Rex Arms t-shirt. I'm sure they've been going today on the camera. Ryan's grape t-shirt as well. One day I'll take the plunge and make a t-shirt for me when we find something funny enough.
Well, it's a tote. I think it's going to be tote bag you. Tote bag Lee. I don't know. I've got to think of a phrase for you.
Okay. That's your mission for the next week, Joe. That is inspirationnation.org.uk. So, Joe, you said this idea came from Ryan suggesting this as a topic.
Yes.
What was it, Ryan, that was on your mind when you brought this up that you wanted to talk about, or what's your kind of view of the whole leadership management dynamic?
I was worried you'd ask me this because I can't remember.
Excellent.
It was around Christmas I sent it to him, so that's like
it was
2-3 months ago.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, but look, we've been recording for half an hour now. You have half an hour to prep for this, Ryan. What are you talking about? Right, while you're thinking...
Let me see if I can find the text. Bear with me.
Okay. While we're doing that, Joe...
Yes.
See, as we all have, so in my time, I've worked for people who I would put in that boss category, who very much wanted me to comply with what needed to happen, all those sorts of traits. I've also worked with some very good leaders who were focused on people stuff, what are the best in people. One of them was yourself, Joe.
Oh, very kind. Thanks, Lee.
You used to keep development diaries for all of us. So even when we weren't doing it for ourselves, you were making sure we were developing.
I still do that, by the way. I still do that. I still
really
myself. I still have one. Every new company I've gone to, I start a new one. I've got a new one. Yes, I always do.
Really good.
Yeah, it does. It's so useful. Anyway, yeah, I still keep one.
And this is where, when we talk about our stories, these are from like some of your early days in doing this. And you've even said that you weren't really aware of coaching like you are now when you were back in those roles, but you were still doing a lot of these things. You were clearly a natural leader. It was all about the people. It was all about development. I mean, we talked about in the past, I've got huge opportunities to learn things that I still use now from that environment. So what was it that lent you to taking that kind of people approach before people were talking about taking the people approach?
Do you know what? I just love people. I don't know. It's like, I really want people to win. I've always wanted, it's like, I didn't even know that, but I just really wanted people to win. And I always felt like, we had those bosses, and the ones I'm talking about, we had those bosses that just want to drive results without consciously thinking about people. Yeah. I always felt conflicted, always felt conflicted. So I always wanted to protect the team. It's so difficult in those situations when you've got a culture like that. It is so hard. But I knew it was right to do it that way. So for me, it's just, I love seeing people get to where they want to be. There can be nothing better for me than seeing people light up and go, oh, I've done that now. I've got that now. And I don't remember Lee, when we was doing what we were doing, and I used to always get the people that needed development in my team that always used to come to my teams, because that's the way I operated. I would try and do my best. Now, best in the world, I couldn't help everybody, but I'd do my damnedest to do it, right? If they're willing, then I'm there to help them. So for me, it's always been a trait. I mean, even from my very earliest days, I was quite lucky. My very first job that I had, I was very much looked after. It was a very small business, and I got cared for, and I think that probably kicked it off for me. But I've always cared about people, and when I went to obviously the next one after that is that I was then thrust into a leadership position. I didn't know what that meant. What's going on? And I had to sort of you know what it's like. I had to train. You had to train people from knowing nothing to becoming quite technically good a job in a very short space of time without any of these training rooms and all that sort of thing, and none of that facilities. So I had to sort of do it on the fly and had to find ways of doing it where I could be as supportive as possible, as well as doing my own job. Of course, you had to do all the managing bits, doing that at the same time. But I always felt that I lent towards the people rather than the process. Very much about how can I help this person? I suppose it comes from, I want this person to be happy.
Yeah.
I want them to feel safe, and I want them to come into work feeling that I want to come into work. And it's not always the case. It's always very difficult. Sometimes people don't want to come into work, of course, but I want to make it as much as I could and as good as I could for them. And if that meant, I had people, I said, well, if you want to learn more, come see me. So I've had people come up to me and said, look, if you want to go at lunchtime, we'll talk about it. People want to advance technically. I had, people who became really high managers and they said, we want to learn more about, a certain technical piece of information. I said, well, let's do it at lunchtime. I would do that. I'd go out my way to do it because I just love people. And I think I didn't really know that until, it all constantly happened. And I thought, oh, what's this coaching thing? And I was doing coaching. I didn't know what we talked about that before, where I was talking about coaching. We did coaching, but we didn't really know what coaching was. We just thought it's something that helps people, right? That's what I thought it was. Just something that can help people, get them in, teach them everything. But that's not what coaching is. It's really funny as well, because when I'm delivering coaching to coaches now, I said, what's your view on coaching? And they thought exactly what it was that I thought it was about 20 years ago. And it's even going now, it's really interesting to think what people think coaching is. So it's really, I think it's my mission to make sure that people understand what coaching really is and how powerful it is and how empowering it is, really. That it's just something that is just incredible. For me, it's just that. It's just wanting to help people, make them feel safe, make them feel they're progressing, and getting them to where they want to be, in wherever they want to, in their jobs, whatever they're doing. And that's it. And I hope that's answered your question. It's a bit of a long answer, I know. I hope that answered it a little bit.
No, it's a good answer. A very good answer.
Yeah, it's just difficult because you just evolve over time. And when you look back, you start to, as we talked about, connect the dots backwards a little bit.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it sounds like a connecting the dots backwards thing. I'm struggling with my words today, but it's nice as well. Like you said, you've got people who are in that position you were in, and with all the benefit of everything you've learned and developed, and the mistakes you've made along that way, like we were talking earlier, you're now in a room able to impart that people and escalate them through that journey so much quicker.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with it, they're getting all that like 20 years worth of experience in the space of an hour.
Yeah.
But I'm accelerating them. But it's really funny when I do the exercises about using the models and stuff like that, coaching and stuff. People aren't really sure what they're going to get, and then they come out of it. I said, and it's really funny when they do the exercise, role play. I said, no, it's not a role play, right? You come with something to this session. You want to work on something. You're going to leave with a plan, and the whole point of the coaching is that you're going to work on this plan. So when you leave, this is going to give you massive value because you're going to be working on this thing. You're working towards it, and people come out of it and they just feel, wow, this is amazing. It's almost like I turned on the lights, and it's fantastic, and it's sort of taking the veil off this whole sort of new world for them, really, where they thought what coaching was. They take it off, think, oh my god, this is so good. And the fact they can do, they can coach each other as well. And there's no requirement for you to be a manager or a leader. We're talking about that now, And that's why I think coaching is so important when you're a leader. It's so important to actually, really sit back and go with your team members or your team or your departments or your organization and say, okay, so, you've got your organizational objectives, of course, and everything feeds into that. So, okay, looking at that, what would you like to do? And actually getting the coachee to think about really what they want. It's like, because so much stuff is prescriptive, so much stuff is saying, look, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. How would you like to do it? Giving them some free rein, because they say, don't they, that if people feel they've got more control over their work, they're much more motivated to do it. And I think there's a lot to be said in that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And then, like you said, you're leading them, create an environment where they can do that rather than, again, the whole compliance boss, you're here for me thing that we talk about.
Yeah, and I think when we got together, I think there's a guy we were talking to, I think at that time, I think he was heading up I think what was his name? I can't remember his name. But he's heading up, so the e-learning platforms there back then, the LMSs. And
yeah.
And was talking about compliance, and we were talking about it and said, we do not want people to comply. We want to deliver more than what there's on their blooming contracts. We want to feel like they're working for an organisation that's something special, and that's what organisations should be trying to achieve all the time. People should be wanting to work for the organisation and feel they're part of something special, working towards something that they're working on something that is amazing, that they feel that they're contributing, that they feel that there's something in it that they get value from, that when they do something that it actually makes an impact, and they can see the impact of their work on the organisation, how it helps the organisation reach its objectives. If you can get people to see that, if you can get people to say, look, every time we touch, because one of my things I do, so every time we touch a keyboard, that's time that's spent with the business. The more efficient you are, the better it is. And those results that an organisation gets because your hard work and getting people to recognise that a company achieves great things, but the reason they achieve great things is because of the work that the people put in. I think if the organisation can link it back to that, you are going to get so much more amazing engagement. You won't get people to comply. They will want to work so much more for your organisation, or give much more than their contract, because they'll want to. They'll feel they're part of something special. And I think, that's what companies can do. And if you can do that, that's why a lot of these people like Google and, all those types of companies, are excelling, because they've got people, probably not all of them, but a lot of the people probably are like, I love working here. They're doing something special. People probably working for SpaceX, people working for Elon. They think, I'm part of something special, working on a mission to Mars. Imagine, being that person who's helping, build something that's on a mission to, what's it called? Forwarding or enhancing human, I'm not doing it now, look, human evolution. But you know what I mean? Imagine that, right? And we can get some element of this. We can take that as inspiration. We can embed this into our organisations and say, hey, you are a part of this. When we achieve these great results, you help do that. You help part. And when we're struggling, you're going to help us make it better. When we've resolved it and we've got through the challenge, you helped us do that. And it's helping people recognise that they're a massively important part of an organisation. You're not just a number. You are someone so important. And leaders, managers, they have got a duty of care to their people to make sure that people feel like that, and not just, like you say, not just get a tick box. How do you actually feel? Get to the truth. Actually understand, do they love the organisation? If they don't love the organisation, why don't they love it? What's the reason? And deal with it. There you go.
I like a bit of passionate Joe on the podcast.
God, and that's the thing. People are afraid to step into it. When I get people who coach in my room, they're afraid to step into the difficulties. There was a person in my room, and he wanted to improve his time management, right? And he was talking about I can't remember if I tell this on the podcast, but he was talking about wanting to improve time management, right? And this is like this another leader talking to both leaders, talking to each other, right? So coaches, so leaders can coach each other, and they're coaching each other in the room because it's part of the coaching session, it's how to train to coach. Anyway, and he wanted to improve his time management, and one of the things come up, well, he says, I don't really sort of manage the time very well at home. And the other leader was going to let them go on that. They weren't going to dive into it. And when I examined it, they didn't want it. They felt it might be real. I said, no, that was the key. That's the key that goes into it. You need to step into that, because that's probably the key that's not making them manage good time at work. And so that's the thing. We've got to be able to step into this in a really non-judgmental way, in a real, if you're a coach, you've got to be curious. You've got to really want to know more about that person. And if you step into those places where you might feel a bit uncomfortable, you've got to step in, because that could be the key that unlocks the door for them to get to the next stage. And that was really interesting, that people want to step away from this thing. You've got to step into it. You've got to just say, so tell me more about that. What are the struggles you have, but be in a real caring, supportive way. And that's what coaching and having leaders is about creating an environment for safety. It's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to be uncomfortable, because we're here. I've got you, right? I've got you here. And we're going to work on this together. We're going to have a plan to get you to where you want to be. I'm going to support you through that process. And that's what I love about it. And that's what I think it's all about.
Has that given you enough time to remember what you wanted to talk about, Ryan?
Yeah. I think I look back at the text, there was nothing there. But I
thought that might be the case as well.
I had a good think. And I think at the time I was in a role in which I was potentially looking to move into a leadership role, or a first level management role, if you like, where I currently work. And I was just kind of trying to find out the person I'd want to be. Obviously, we've discussed before that I'd been on a management course throughout 2019. That's still running now. But obviously, before you step into that role, you can kind of half decide the person that you want to be before you do it, or the leader you'd want to be, or the manager you'd want to be. You can kind of set some core principles, I guess. Whether they work or not is a different question, and you'd probably have to tailor those as time goes on. But initially, I think you'd need to step into it, or I thought I'd initially need to step into it knowing what I'd want to achieve personally from this. And I think that was probably why I was looking to talk about it, just to kind of see if I could get some more kind of background information, I guess.
So, and what do you think your core principles kind of are in that sort of scope? What sort, back to your original thought of what sort of person would you want to be? What is set in your head at the moment?
I think I kind of described it at the start when we first started talking about it. I think I said that as a leader, you tend to be quite evenly split on people and tasks, so you tend to kind of focus on both. And I think that's something that I could do, and something that I think I'd be quite good at. And I think with the skills I've learned this year and been on the podcast with you two guys who obviously have experience in leadership and management, is something that I can kind of pick up. But I think generally as some key principles, I would kind of make sure that the people that I look after and wider in the department I work for are okay. And if they need anything, then, you know, I can be a referral point to them. I think that's a good start, because once you have that rapport with the people that you work with / for, or people that work for you, that helps build the relationships and makes them want to work for you. And that doesn't just stop at me, that doesn't stop at any level. So I think that's probably mainly where I'd look, or where I feel like I've started to look anyway.
No, it sounds good, and it's all back to that trust place again, isn't it? That you know, people know that you're there for them, and they can trust you, and they can be open with you. And like you said, you build that rapport, and hopefully that continues. I had a really nice moment in this last week where there's someone that I used to work with years ago now, long time ago, and they were one of the team leaders that I was looking after at the time, and we got on really well, and we both together developed really well in some key areas, and, you know, had a good back and forth conversation about things. So they were developing, I was being very open about the things I was working on, and we built up a really good working relationship. And then as time goes on, you move on into different roles, move all over the place, and he's a manager, still in the same business, but a manager of a completely different department now. And actually he had quite a big idea he wanted to pitch for his area. And he kind of grabbed me this week and said, look, would you mind just having a look at this? And then a couple of times during the day came back to me and kind of ran through this concept, and then showed me stuff he's wrote down on this idea he wants to pitch, just to get my view on it before he took that to his current leaders to get sign off, which I thought was really nice, that even after all this time, we still got that relationship, that he'd be really open on an idea he was nervous about, and, you know, can be that open and ask for feedback and ask for input and trust what feedback they were going to get on it as well, which I hope is some of what is my leadership stuff that comes through. Like you said, you don't necessarily have to be in that ordained position for people to want to look to you for advice or guidance or anything else.
No, of course.
I think there's a big thing in that as well. I think, you know, so we talk about leader over manager, and we're talking about managers managing teams, but it's also about manager-manager relationships, isn't it? And managers up above, and managers relating to their managers that are above them, and what are those relationships like? And I think, Ryan, you touched on it there. You know, how do I build those relationships, and making sure that, you know, whether people above me or my team, you know, how do I manage that? How do I create rapport? And I think that is the key. And the fact that, Lee, you had someone come to you after all these years shows that you built that trust and rapport. And so, you know, he's looking for someone to pitch to say, does this suck? Does it run? What do you think? And actually, what do you think about it? And actually, that shows how deep ingrained, once you build that trust and you do it properly, how long it lasts.
Yeah, no, you're right. And whenever people ask me about what I'm proudest of in work, those relationships, because there's a few people like that, are probably the thing I'm proudest of above everything else.
I think, you know, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? Absolute volumes. I think it does. And even when we're talking about here, I know, you know, we go back a few years, you know, we wouldn't be talking like this had we not trusted each other at those points, you know. We wouldn't be having these conversations. So again, it's those whole things, isn't it? And now with Ryan as well, you know, many years down the line, maybe 10 years, 15 years down the line, we'll still be talking, and it'll be about, you know, all these types of things, and about the rapport we've generated together. And it just shows you, and I think I think all it comes down to when you think about leader and manager, about it's about all those things, but it's about the connection between people, how well you manage those connections, how you can really communicate properly with people, and understand people, and how you get it right, and being open when you get it wrong as well.
Absolutely
as we talked
right.
about before, right? But I think being open about getting it wrong can be one of the hardest things, because ego gets in the way sometimes, and you've got to sort of part of that ego and go, look, I have done this wrong, but it's important, because people can see that you're human and that you do get things wrong, and sometimes you've got to hold your hands up, right? But it is hard. It's difficult. It's not easy, yeah. Because when someone says, "Oh, you're now a leader or manager," you're now, you're well, I'm now responsible for this. I've got to get things right. Now, you're not always going to get it right, but that's why I think having relationships with other managers, like other managers and managers above you, to the side of you, having a good, I think, core of managers where you can actually go to and say, "Hey, look, what do you think about this?" I think that's so powerful. You can have that sort of environment. So, Ryan, I think you're on the right track there, my friend. I think it sounds great.
Good.
Is it a good point to mention JN Coaching Tech right now?
Sure.
Stick it into your Google machine, take you over to Joe's website. There's lots of good reading materials. Joe's weekly blog is in there, the daily videos. What number are we at now, Joe? We must be
486
towards 500, I think.
486, I think today it is.
That, we're nearly there.
Yeah.
Couple of weeks away.
You said something to me, I thought that was just astounding.
Yeah, I noticed that. And it's even freakier than what I said. So Joe's 500th video, of course, avid listeners will know, everything we do now has come from that day when Joe decided, I'm going to put out a video tomorrow, and one the next day, and one the next day. He's now been doing that for 486 days in a row. The podcast was something that kind of came off the back of that quite organically. And the day it's Saturday, and let me get my calendar up, and I hope I won't break my computer when I do it. If I go quiet, you know that the calendar has broken my computer.
Oh, no.
So Saturday the 7th of March will be the 1 year anniversary of when we first got together and recorded our first set of podcasts. So the following Thursday after that is when the first podcast would have gone out, which I believe is, so I go whiz all the way back through my calendar now. You can maybe hear my mouse clipping in the background.
Yep.
So Thursday, the 14th of March, was when the very first episode went out, recorded on Saturday the 9th. So the 1 year anniversary of that is Saturday the 7th of March, which is coming up in a few weeks, which we don't even know what we're going to do, but we're going to have our 1 year anniversary show. And that very day, Joe, Saturday the 7th, will be the day your 500th video comes out. How freaky is that?
That is super freaky. That is unreal. I
think that will be the day for it to go out on the Sunday that we'll record the podcast on the same day as the 500 video. I just think that is such an amazing coincidence.
That is, isn't it? That's a bit freaky, isn't it? That is super freaky. I can't believe that. That is, don't know. That is a connecting the dots forwards. That one,
isn't it?
Let's put pressure now.
We couldn't have planned that any better if we tried.
There's a little bit of pressure now, isn't there, to make sure I have to do one now every day for definite now.
I think if we're at 486, Joe, I think you're fine to cruise through to 500.
Oh yeah, I should do. But hopefully nothing happens in between. But yeah, I'm sure it will be fine. But yeah, that's so weird. So what we're going to do? I don't know what we're going to do for that anniversary.
We'll have some good stuff ready for everyone. So I finished off my ad. Google machine, JN Coaching Tech. You all know the rest.
Yeah.
So Ryan, has that been a good conversation on your topic that you suggested for you?
Yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of different elements. Again, it's always nice, we talk about it quite a bit, but it's always nice to have the three different perspectives of Joe, that's somebody that used to be really involved in leadership. Lee is somebody that's currently really involved in leadership, and I'm kind of starting to climb that ladder. So I think it's good to have all three kind of elements, all three perspectives.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's such a high, I mean, if you look at anything on social media in this sort of space, there's so much conversation about leadership traits and everything like that. It's a fascinating subject. And hopefully for everyone listening, there's been some really good kind of observations and tips. And as always, some of our stories to give people some good advice to take away as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think just a final thought on this is just to really around, just bring yourself into your leadership, right? Be genuine. And I think it goes back to those sort of authenticity sort of things like that. Don't
Yeah.
be someone you're not. Do not.
Yeah.
Just bring you into it, like, because people think, oh, now I'm manager or whatever, I now got to have this sort of, don't know, I can't even think about it, but like some sort of image. Yes, you've got these sort of things you got to do, but you just bring you into it, because that's what people will gravitate towards. If you just try and be someone you're not, it's not going to work. So the most important thing is to be honest and be yourself, and make sure you bring yourself into it and be a human being.
I think that a good way to kind of identify who you are is to complete kind of a leadership style kind of test, if you like. I know that I've done them before, and I assume you guys have done them before, but if I'm thinking of the right one, it's where you get split into 4 different elements. Somebody that's analytical, somebody that's a driver, somebody that's a team player, and somebody that's a charismatic motivator. I think that's right.
That's exactly right. It's like a grid, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, I can't remember the exact test and how you get there. I think you answer questions and you select a letter that's most likely to be you, and if you pick the most certain letters, it puts you into X category or whatever. But I think if you're unsure of the leader that you are, or the leader that you kind of feel like is in your personality to be, completing a test like that definitely helped me. So
it's really good. I'm putting up on the screen now the grid for it, if people can see.
Oh, well done.
If they're watching on YouTube, so you've got 4 people who had to see how atrocious my handwriting is. I can see it on the screen there. So you've got 4 blocks, and obviously some people are listening. So top left is analytical, top right is driver, bottom left is team player, and bottom right is charismatic motivator, which I think is the one you were talking through there, Ryan. Like you said, you answer a load of questions and it gives you a score. So they're all rated like from whatever way it is, 0 to 10 on one way or the other. So you get a score against each category, where you plot them in, and then it gives you a square, and it won't sit dead center, it will sit, and it kind of show you what your 2 main traits are normally, based on where the ratios are. Where did you interested where you came out on?
Where do you think I came out? How well do you know me?
I don't know, actually, because I can see there's some team player and analytical stuff on me, but charismatic motivator as well.
Yeah, that's definitely where I came out.
Yeah,
I think my understanding is as well that you work best with, it's not always the case, but you tend to work best with those that are in the opposite corner to you.
Yes, absolutely right.
So I fit into, my main one was charismatic motivator, but I also think I fell into driver as well, which I think is at the opposite corner to each other.
That's their charismatic bottom and drivers up above it, because they have similar traits, but they're around where your leadership box is. I started when I first started in the analytical box, and then over time, because I did it every like 9 months or so, shot down into charismatic motivator, and then kind of moved a bit into the driver. And I think as you move on in your career, you meet different people, you learn different skills. As you develop, you'll move around that.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's like you said, it's really good just to understand who you are, and like exactly like Joe says, is be yourself, be authentic, learn the tools you need to use, but then use them in your own way and be authentic to yourself. And one of the things you say, Joe, that always sticks with me is don't compromise your integrity. Because if you are, then you're probably looking to do the wrong thing.
Absolutely, I would totally agree with that. Absolutely,
and you're not the wrong thing, but the wrong thing for you. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to be true to yourself at all times.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I totally would agree with you. There's so many good tools out there. There was one called Insights that I did, and that's a really good one. I actually keep it with me. It's just probably too long to explain now because we're near the end, or an hour already, I think. But yeah, there's so many good tools out there. There's free tools. I think 16 personalities online as well, which is really quite good.
Yeah, I've seen this.
I've done that one. I think I come as a protagonist on that one, which is really interesting. So it's always good. It's just, I think you've got to remember with these tests as well, they are just highlighting certain things that your preferences. So they're not going to always get it bang. It's a guide, and it's a good piece of self-awareness, but it's not like not a golden bullet. What's about a silver bullet? I suppose not a golden bullet.
Yeah.
It's a golden bullet.
No, it's not golden either, but yeah, it helps you understand yourself.
Yes.
Doesn't it? But no one fits squarely into a box.
Exactly. Yeah. So don't have these things. Take them for what they are. But just you'll know when you're, like I say, Lee says about the integrity. Don't compromise on that, because you'll know when it is, because you'll get the feeling that you have not done the right thing. So when you've done that, reflect on it and go, what was it that made me do that? And just try and improve off the back of that. But yeah, by all means, do these tests, because you will. Because also, what's useful about these sort of tests is that you will find out if your other managers do it or your team do it. You can communicate in the sort of way that they need to be communicated to, which is quite interesting, quite good.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's quite handy, especially if you've got someone who's analytical, lots a lot of data. We need them to do something, getting loads and loads of information. So it's really quite information. It's quite nice to be able to sort of say, right, that person, to give them a lot of information before they'll do the thing that I need them to do. So yeah, in that way, it's really, really useful. But I say it's only guides. But don't put yourself. They're not going to put you in a box. It's just a guide. And I always say to the guys I train to, we do a lot of this in our training. And we do a lot of that, and they say, "Oh, is that not quite me?" And that's not all. I said, "It's not meant to be that. It's not meant to be you." But there's certain things. Is it mainly sort of the strengths that you recognise? Yes, that's right. And then people, that's right. And people seem a little bit more relieved when that's the case. So again, just getting a balance with it all. But yeah, absolutely, tools are really amazing. But just remember, it's all about you and how you're feeling about stuff. Just be you, and do the best you can. Look after people, make them feel safe. Do the best for people. You'll be great. You'll be stunning.
Did Joe go robotic for you as well there, Lee?
Yes, it did.
So
it's all of us. Yeah.
You
So
did.
for everyone listening, they probably got a version of Robot Joe there talking through.
I'll try.
Nación de Inspiración.
There you go. He's back. It's Spanish Joe's back now. We've pressed the wrong button on the remote control.
It's like Spanish
Vámonos,
Buzz Lightyear.
vámonos, amigos.
Spanish Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story.
Yeah.
So, feels like a good place to wrap it up for this week, guys.
Yeah,
really
it's
good
good.
conversation there again. Keep
Yes.
it, as Joe said, as Joe says, as we all say, be yourself, be authentic. And if you're going to be responsible for people, definitely be focused on being a leader and not a boss.
Yes, absolutely agree.
So, shall I count us down, guys?
Yes, you do it.
Thank you again, everyone, for listening. We appreciate it as always. Whatever service you're listening on, leave us a review, genuine thoughts, any feedback you've got, hit that 5-star button if you think we deserved it. Any feedback, follows, comments across all social media, listen TOIN, or at JN Coaching Tech. And we will see everyone next week. 3, 2, 1.
Inspiration Nation. Catch you guys later.
Nación de Inspiración.